Okay, day 5 of OTAs, the media was in the building, and whenever the media is in the building, the information highway is flowing. Social media was flowing. Giants.com had all the information. We had player interviews, we had videos on Twitter from the practice, we had updates. Everything you can ask for happened today, and I always love that type of information because I'm starving for this type of information, especially at this part where it's not quite training camp yet, but you're getting ready to get up there, and you just want to know everything you want to know about Giants football, and that brings you here to me, and hopefully I can share all that information with you. Again, I took a lot of notes today, watched a lot of videos, read a bunch of tweets, had conversations on Spaces. A lot of things happened today. And without further ado, let's jump right into it. So Brian Daboll spoke at the podium today. They asked him about the OTAs and, what they plan on doing. And last week they worked a lot on 7-on-7, 9-on-7 and stuff like that. When are we going to see more 11-on-11? Of course, everybody wants to see more 11-on-11. But he said that this part of the workouts, off-season programs, they do 11-on-11, but a lot of that is walkthroughs when you have 11-on-11. You see more active speed and things like that for the 7-on-7s, and he's going to wait until everybody's in pads and stuff like that before they ramp up that 11-on-11. He also talked about focusing on the fundamentals in the first couple of weeks, and fundamentals, the offensive scheme, the blocking assignments. He was also talking about sitting down with certain players, returning players, mainly a lot of rookies coming back and seeing what those expectations are, for this, or setting expectations into this season here. So you love to hear things like that. He spoke about Evan Neal. He spoke about Kayvon Thibodeau. And he keeps it very, very political when it comes to talking about players specifically. If you ask him general questions, he's going to give you a little bit more information because he's not just pinpointing one person and giving that information. So I always appreciate how Brian Daboll's able to do that, kind of skate around or get away from certain questions. He was also asked about Adoree Jackson being out there as far as being a punt returner, and does he have any concern because of what happened last year? Another political answer saying, those things are parts of the game. They're going to put whoever they feel back there, gives them the best chance. So you already know how I feel. Adoree Jackson should never be back there, in my opinion. Never, ever, ever, never, ever should be back there. Now, also, he did talk about, or was asked about, some of the rookies getting first team reps, and this is pre-practice. So after the fact, hindsight is 2020. You saw some things happen in practice, or I read some things about practice, but prior to practice, he was saying, of course, he wants to get these guys working with the ones. So I'm assuming he's talking about Hyatt, talking about Deonte Banks, things like that, guys that you expect to contribute a little bit more than some of your other rookies. But he did say that. They asked him about how he felt about the schedule, the toughness of the schedule. And he said he doesn't even think about the schedule as too far ahead. He said he takes it a day at a time. And again, that is, pretty much vintage Brian Daboll. Not worried about the schedule. Obviously, he has a plan in place for week number 1, I'm assuming, or they're at least thinking about it, thinking about schemes. But he's saying right now it's so early into just the off season, or I should say the preseason, not even mini camp or training camp yet, that he's not even focused on the schedule as that. But he said whoever we play, we play, and whenever we play them, we play them. So again, I'm not scared. The coach ain't scared. The team ain't scared. I'm ready for whatever happens in these games. Absolutely. Now, he did talk about Waller a little bit, and he said that Darren Waller's been great so far. He's a true professional. What do you expect the man to say about one of those big acquisitions that you get? This one being via trade, but also being a guy that can potentially be the top tight end in the division, a guy that was looked at as a top 5 tight end just a few years ago. So, and if he's healthy, I expect him to be the same way. He did also get asked a question about DeAndre Hopkins, and he kept it very, very straight. He said, when guys like that are available, we do our due diligence. So that tells me that, yeah, there's some interest there. Research it, see if it's a good fit, and ultimately reach out to see if that guy can be brought into the building. And that just goes to show me, after everybody, especially us fans, we have people that don't want them, people that will absolutely take them, and then you have people that are in the middle and say, let's see what happens. Again, I'm for, let's go ahead and grab DeAndre Hopkins. Right now, at this point, he no longer costs you any draft capital. So why not add a guy like that to the team? And then you can talk about, the money is something crazy. You don't want to hamstring the cap. Well, guess what? 2024, 2025, probably the most cap space we're going to have, even with some of the moves we predict that's going to happen, that being Andrew Thomas, possibly Xavier McKinney, and whoever else, might get signed. He also talked about Paris Campbell, and he was saying, they asked him about if he had any history, did he scout Paris Campbell, and he did say that prior to the pro day when he was still with Buffalo, they in fact took out Paris Campbell, for a dinner prior to the pro days. So that's going to be my information about Brian Daboll and his presser. Let's talk about this practice, though. Let's talk about this practice. The number one story for me is that Dex and Leo were in attendance today. They weren't in voluntary OTAs last week, so they missed the first few practices. They missed the one from yesterday as well, but today those guys are in the building. They're passing out hugs, high fives, all that. Everybody's happy and excited to see those two guys in the building. We also saw that Wan'Dale Robinson was working a jugs machine. They had videos of that, him just working a jugs machine on the side. Didn't mention much about him actually getting any reps. I didn't see him in any of the videos. That's all with the individual positional drills and stuff like that. Didn't see him in that, but we saw him on the jugs machine, doing this thing. Sterling Shepard was also off to the side, not in any of the group activities as well, but just having those guys out there on the field matters. Now, here's the big question. I said in the last video, I'm not getting any updates on Joshua Ezeudu. I reached out to Joshua Ezeudu and Marcus McKeithen, both on Instagram. Again, no responses. I don't expect, but I'm gonna keep asking because that's what I do. I'm trying to get you guys this information. So my pride might be hurt a little bit when I get egged, but it is what it is. But we did get an update. Joshua Ezeudu was out there. He was not with the first team, but he was in rotation with Ben Bredesen. For Marcus McKeithen, also he was out there, but he was getting a lot of work at the right tackle spot. So I believe what they were saying is he was running with the third team at right tackle. And that's some of the versatility that you want to see. And again, we drafted McKeithen as a guard. And then he showed last year that he has some worth and some versatility playing the tackle spot. So now you have two guys from the same college drafted the same year. Ezeudu, McKeithen, both guys are showing the versatility to play both guard and tackle. I think that's very, very important because after you have your starters, you need the most versatile guys behind that. So we'll see what happens. Again, I think that Bredesen, even though he's running with the first team at left guard, I think he's our best backup center as well. And that's going to be one of those battles that we need to check out throughout the training camp. Another thing, Deonte Banks running with the first team. So Deonte Banks running with the first team defense on the opposite side of Adoree Jackson. Big news. Everybody knew that was going to happen, but at least we saw it today. And then guess who was in the slot? I gave you a couple chances to guess who was in the slot. Who was in the slot? Cordell Flott was in the slot. That's what's going on today. Love to see it. A surprise today was we had a safety working with the first team that's not really a safety, or we don't know him as a safety. Nick McLeod was working with the safeties today in practice. Adoree Jackson was asked about that in his presser, and he pretty much said, you know what? He's a Swiss Army knife. He doesn't get distracted. He's never down on himself, even through the hard times. And I'm paraphrasing now, but he's always ready to work and step in. So that was pretty much the gist of that conversation when he was asked about Nick McLeod running with the safeties. And I'm surprised at that because there was a lot of options that I thought would be there at safety. Obviously, Bobby McCain was the big pickup, not the big signer, but the guy that we picked up, penciled in to be the guy next to McKinney. But also, we drafted a couple of secondary players as well later in the draft. The kid from Old Dominion, the kid from Houston. But here you have Nick McLeod getting reps with the first team at safety next to Adoree Jackson. So that's something, next to Xavier McKinney. So that's something that, piqued my interest, and I'm going to keep myself involved in that situation. Another player interview was Darius Slayton. They asked Darius Slayton about speed, the aspect of speed being added to this roster. And he said, yes, it's very, very noticeable. And he appreciates speed. He did joke and say that when they asked him who was faster, him or Hyatt, he said it has to be me. And I'm curious to see what happens. But when you think about that fast room, again, you have Slayton, you have Hyatt, you have Paris Campbell. All these guys are pretty much 4-3 guys. And then he mentioned Jeff Smith as well, and I didn't know Jeff Smith was a low 4-3, 4-2 guy. So that's just crazy to me. Didn't know that, but that speed aspect that the Giants have been missing has been added this year. And again, however this thing shakes out with the wide receiver room, it's going to be a hell of a competition, in training camp and in the preseason. And then outside of that, we had Evan Neal talking about his work with Willie Anderson, in the off season. And one of the things that I pointed out, actually I pointed it out in a Spaces today when I was talking, that he was working with Willie Anderson. It looks like he was working mainly on his stance, shorten up the length between his feet, and he absolutely said that. He was talking about being able to adjust his stance so that it best fits what he needs to do to attack some of these speed rushers. So I was just happy to see that the man was working on a couple of things. They asked him if the injury caused any issues last year, and he said everybody gets injured. I'm not going to blame my performance on that injury. So a guy that's showing accountability for what's going on. He knew he could have played better last year, but he didn't. But he's working to get better. So again, shout out to Evan Neal, showing that he's putting in the work and understand what he has to do in order to be better for the New York Giants. And lastly, the last interview was going to be Kayvon Thibodeaux. And it was funny talking with Kayvon Thibodeaux. They had a lot of questions for him. They asked him about, his sack numbers going up. And he was saying that, he was almost there and was getting there often. And one thing that he has to work on is finishing. And I agree with that. Because he was the king of almost. Now, here's the thing. He was getting held a lot last year. He's probably going to get more calls this year, possibly, but you can't even worry about calls. You have to work on your repertoire, getting to a second move and things like that. So that man has been working. Now, funny thing also is I always tease Kayvon Thibodeaux about his legs. The man has skinny legs. And somebody asked him about, working on his core strength, pretty much what Wink was talking about. And he said, my legs might look the way that they do, but trust me, they're as strong as anybody. So there it is. He answered the question. I said, maybe it's genetics. And it sounds like it's genetics when it comes to these skinny legs of Kayvon Thibodeaux. So I thought that was pretty funny. He also talked about the new additions on the defense. And he was saying that he's happy with the kid, Deonte Banks. And he said, when you have a lot more coverage time, it helps you to get to the quarterback, or it gives you that extra second that you might need to get to the quarterback. So he's excited about all the additions, Bobby Okereke, the additions on the defensive line and things like that. And also, I want to jump back in that Adoree Jackson interview, because I was thinking about Deonte Banks. They did ask Adoree Jackson about Deonte Banks, and he was saying that when he drafted him, he already knew about him, and he said, but when they drafted him, he watched his tape. So you have a cornerback going back watching another cornerback's tape to see how he can fit best in the system. And he said he's excited to be the mentor for Deonte Banks. He's excited with what he can do. And also he said he's a great personality. He fit right in with the team. He said he's out here singing and doing things like that. And I want to hear it. I think it's going to be hilarious. And I want to know what he's singing. That accent, that Baltimore accent, is something I'm very, very intrigued about. But again, you see that there's a vibe, even with the rookies coming in. There's a vibe. These guys are being welcomed in. They're showing their personalities. Nobody's scared to do anything. They're talking. They're helping each other. And it's, even though it's a competition-filled practice, it's still a family vibe or a brotherly vibe where everybody's trying to get better. They know what the common cause is, and that's to win games and push the New York Giants to the next level. So great practice. Shout out to the beat writers for all the information being shared. Shout out to the interviewers asking great questions today. And one thing we didn't hear about, though, or I didn't hear about, was Saquon Barkley. And again, that's the elephant in the room. But that situation should be, I guess, not finalized, but we should get more information about that, in the next few weeks. That's just an assumption by me. But I want to thank you guys for vibing with me. Please like, comment, and subscribe. And from one Giants fan to another, this is Big Dash Knows, Big Blue Nation. Let's go.